Welcome everyone. I'm Anuradha Parmar. I'm the Executive Director of UDRI, and it is such a pleasure to have you all at the Resource Center at UDRI launching the 15th edition of the Mumbai Reader titled Civil Society and the City. UDRI has been publishing the Reader since 2006, and every year the Reader is a time capsule. It captures some unique issues that are specific to the city in that particular year, and also continues the dialogue on the usual critical themes of climate, housing, mobility, and infrastructure. This year's Reader, however, is very special. In this issue, we bring to you 24 original stories of civic action that have shaped your city. Stories that examine the varied tools in the advocacy toolkit, the strategic meetings, impactful press articles, assertive litigation, and the mobilization of public support used adeptly to equally educate, harangue, influence, and even cooperate with decision makers. Most importantly, these accounts illustrate how protest movements grow into institutions and help create enabling legislative frameworks. Very often we get despondent about the lack of agency that we have as individuals living in this city. We feel helpless in the face of rapid transformation of our cities, many times for the worse. However, this is a chronicle of several individuals, common citizens like you and me, who decided to do something about the changes they did not like, and in that process, these positive deviants willed a legacy for all of us to cherish. It is important to document these stories of empowered citizenry. How the idea of Navi Mumbai came about, who fought to give you the Priyadarshini Park instead of high-end residential buildings, how the botanical garden and zoo managed to survive against lucrative plans to convert it into a fancy restaurant, and most importantly, how did the Kala Ghoda festival itself start? What was the original idea behind the festival? This Reader has many such stories, peppered with wins and losses and ongoing battles, all hoping to inspire you to join the chorus of those shaping Mumbai's destiny. So with that, I'll move on to the panel discussion with a little break where we want to show you this small video launching the Mumbai Reader. So yes, the Reader is online for everyone to view. This year we have very limited copies in print, so I would urge you to just book your copy using the QR code or the Google Sheet that is available at the front desk. And I'll just start with the panel discussion. Let me start with introducing the panelists. Kalpana Sharma at the extreme end, she will be moderating the panel discussion today. Kalpana is an independent journalist and author based in Mumbai. She has written 2 books, The Silence and the Storm, Narratives of Violence Against Women in India, and Rediscovering Dharavi, Stories from Asia's Largest Slum. She has also edited 2 very interesting books, single by choice, happily unmarried women, and missing half the story, journalism as if gender matters. Next, next to Kalpana, we have Nayana Kathpalia. Nayana volunteered with Intact New Delhi for 8 years, and on relocation to Mumbai in 1995, has been active with NGOs such as Okra, Oval Trust, and Nagar, all of which are working for the civic and urban renewal of Mumbai. In the middle, surrounded by 2 women on either side, is Vinod Shetty. Vinod is a human rights lawyer practicing in the Industrial Court, Labour Court, and the High Court of Mumbai. He has been actively involved in social movements since his college days. In his legal practice, he represents the marginalized sections of society. He's the honorary director of Acorn Foundation, and one of their projects, the Dharavi project, helps organize waste collectors and rag pickers. And finally, Shweta Wagh. Shweta is an architect, urban researcher, and associate professor at Krivya. She's a founding member of the Collective for Spatial Alternatives, which is a Mumbai-based planning, research, and advocacy collective. She has worked with various communities in the city on urban policy and planning-related issues. Since 2011, she has been engaged in ethnographic research focused on the transformation of marine fisheries in Mumbai. She is currently pursuing a PhD in sociology at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Bombay. So with that, we'll begin the panel discussion.
Thank you, Anuradha, and hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I was thinking actually yesterday, what an appropriate subject you have for this Bombay Reader, because you know, I was thinking of 1992 and 93, where at least those of us who were around at that time, and especially those of us who are journalists, we saw the city that we cherished and that we had an image of literally break apart. And one often wondered whether it would ever be able to come together. And this, I'm not talking about infrastructure, obviously. I'm talking about what is always referred to as the spirit of Mumbai, which I disagree with, but anyway, that is another subject. But even then, if again those of you who remember that period, it was actually civil society groups that intervened and ensured that relief reached those people who were the most marginalized, who, if it had been left to official sources, it would have just skimmed the surface, it would have gone through political contacts, and it would not have reached the people who were hit the most by the troubles of those times. And you know, it was really a demonstration of the importance of groups who were involved in various different things before 92, coming together for something like this and asserting that, you know, despite our differences, people can actually work together. And I think that crisis time has reached us again very much here, not just for the issues that were raised in 92, 93 in terms of the divides that maybe we had anyway in Mumbai, but that were exacerbated because of what happened. Those divides are much deeper now, but maybe just papered over and not bursting out as we expect they will, but they could at any point. But also in the kind of vision that the people who are paying for whatever is happening in this city have for the city, which seems so different from what we would like the city to be. So you see it in every single infrastructure project that is being implemented. And so as citizens, we can just sit back and groan and be unhappy about it, or we can figure out a way of intervening. So I think this is a very important point because, I mean, from my point of view as a journalist who's followed some of these issues, I can remember in 1990 when I had just joined the Hindu, that I got a report that had been prepared on an underground, a metro system for Mumbai. This was in 1990. What happened to it, you know? A particular company, private company, had made this plan. It was submitted to the government, and there it sat. I believe the Atal Setu, as it's now called, the MTHL, similarly has been stewing in somebody's cupboard for many, many years.
60s.
Yeah, since the 60s, and is now being implemented. So almost everything we think of seems to come late, even if it's appropriate. And then there are things that are inappropriate. So at a time when our city by the sea At the time of climate change and global warming and sea rise, we have the coastal road being built to benefit a small percentage of the population of the city, and despite civil society groups protesting, that seems to have gone ahead. But there are success stories which I believe you've got in this. So I believe that, you know, sometimes there is so much despair that we have to fuel our passion by the things that have worked and figure out why they have worked and see how that can be taken forward, because otherwise it is overwhelming. We live in a city that is huge, that is growing, that has multiple problems, but at the same time the thing is, despite everything, civil society groups have survived, even if they do piecemeal things. And maybe there will be a time when much more collaboration on a much bigger scale needs to take place, where there has to be an assertion of what we want the city to be, you know, as a combined thing, rather than leaving it to individual things. But enough said. One of the people, of course, who, those of us who followed this, has done a great deal on many issues, but particularly in a city like this, which seems to be completely built up, and where there is no place to breathe, and even what we breathe is so poisonous that some of us are dying. Nayana, you have really for many years done this with your different groups that you worked with on open spaces and public spaces that can be accessed by all. I would call them democratic spaces. So what is it that you feel is needed now? And can you tell us, in your own experience, which are the one or two instances where your civil society groups have intervened, which have actually led to a result, and why do you feel that they did lead to a result compared to many others, I'm sure, battles that you fought, which have not led to the kind of change that you have wanted?
Absolutely. And one has to just persevere. If you give up, they win, which is exactly like what my colleague and co-trustee Shirin, who's sitting right there, said. We should not give up, because the minute we give up, those who want to do the wrong things will win. It all started when I relocated to Bombay in '95, and I happened to live opposite the Oval Maidan, which was in a terrible shape. And I knew some people were working for it. So I reached out to them, which is the association, and I met Shirin, who was the head of the association, and we together then worked. It took the association 15 years to get permission to do the Oval. We said, we don't want your money, we don't want your expertise, we don't want anything, we just want permission for us to clean up the Oval and restore it. 15 years of battling the association had. And finally in '97 we got the permission for 6 months. If you don't start the work, nothing will happen. Fortunately, we had some very good friends. We had Rahul Mehrotra, David Cardos and their team, who had done all the plans, everything was ready. We had reached out to the funders, they had said, you get the permission, we will fund you. Everything was in place, so the minute we got the permission, we started. It took us 2 years because it's 22 acres and it was in a terrible condition. I mean, 350 truckloads of waste came out of the ground, including wash basins and tube lights and everything. It was just a dumping ground, and the authorities had done nothing. And the ground belongs to the state government, it's not BMC land. So all the more reason, with Mantralaya on one side, the High Courts on the other side, one would have thought they would pay attention, but they did not. And they didn't help us either. To this day, now we restored it in '99, we opened it up and we maintained it, the Oval Trust, which is the organization that does it. The lesson that came out of it is that we just hung on, We had many problems along the way. The authorities, the smaller authorities, whether it was the BMC or the BEST, all of them very unhappy that we were doing this work.
But can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
I mean, what were they unhappy about?
We don't know. I mean, maybe, no, the land, of course, they thought that maybe we'll take the land away. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that. Yeah. So the 15-year battle was, thanks Shirin, they had started plans to build. So there was going to be a stadium. Everybody said no. Then there was to be a athletic track. That was said no. Then there was to be a clubhouse. That we said no to. Finally, they wanted to bring a 2-story underground car park with restaurants and everything. And that was the final straw. By which time, 15 years were almost over, and I think the government was fed up. And this is a little story I'll tell you, which is quite amusing, and it's quite sweet actually. There was a very friendly minister called Pramod Navalkar, and he sent a message and invited us to come and meet him. So we went, and we had decided we said, look, give us the plans and things like that. So at the end of this discussion, and he also had this carrot that all of you people living opposite, we'll give you subsidized parking. That was the carrot. So we said, we're not interested in subsidized parking. He said, actually, I've called you here for one simple reason, because my chief minister said, until those ladies who live opposite the Oval agree to your plans, please don't come to me for permission. And he actually said that, so that is why I have called you, and I thought that was delightful. Pramod Navalkar. Oh, Manoj Joshi. It was the BJP government, Manoj Joshi. So we got Shiv Sena. Sorry. The worst period of the city. Sorry. Yeah. So this was 97. We got the permission, and as they say, it's history. We look after it, and I think they also were concerned whether it was one of the first big projects given over to a private trust to develop. They thought maybe we'll build a house there. I don't know what they thought. Maybe things like they thought that they would build their house. They thought that Shirin and I would build our house there. So anyway, that was the beginning, and that led to many other things in the formation of the other NGO I'm involved with called Nagar. And our focus was also on public open spaces. And the learnings I had from the Oval sort of lent itself to that. And in 2000, we formed this organization, and we found a newspaper article talking about a caretaker policy where 13 grounds, reserved public open spaces, democratic spaces, were taken over by politicians, most of them Shiv Sena politicians, to build Matoshri Club. And you must have got all these names, I've forgotten even, but I remember Matoshri Club, where the arrangement was that 15% of the ground they would get, the rest they have to develop, look after, and allow for the public to come in, which of course they did not, ever. So we went to the chief's municipal commissioner, and we said, what is this, this is a public grounds, you've got all these 9 or 10 places and all. He wasn't aware, municipal commissioners change, all bureaucrats change, and I don't think they know what has happened in the past, unless the juniors feed that to them. So when he saw this, he called his juniors and said, what is happening? Why is this there? And he stayed that policy. This was in around 2000. And that policy stayed even now, and we still do not have an open space policy. It's been going on because they created new ways of circumventing and allowing public, private buildings on public spaces. So that's where it began, and so we've been battling this, trying to keep it open, and with the burgeoning population and the value of land, it seems any open space leads the politician and the builder to want to grab it in some form or the other. And that's been our biggest battle at Nagar, to stay that, to keep the policies in the proper way. We've had some very good municipal officers who understood what we were doing and were very helpful. So that's basically, there have been other things that we've done at Nagar, but this is the open space has been and is still a battle, because apparently I've just heard that Mr. Lodha, the Guardian Minister, is about to release some policy for suggestion objections, and I'm sure it will be nonsense, but because now we are very clear that the BMC has the money, they must look after it, they must not give it to anybody at all, and then what we have suggested is at the ward level, have a committee made up of course, the BMC officers, the gardening department, etc., the local corporator, and the stakeholders of the area, who should meet every month to see that the contractor who's been given the job is doing a good job. Because what happens is they hand it over to some contractor, who does the shoddy job, please go to all the, and then they close the contractor closes the garden for most of the day. So we had this conversation, no madam, we have to look after it. I said, we keep the Oval Maidan open for from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 10 p.m. till we don't charge anything. Cross Maidan Garden, which is another thing we did, at the request of the government finally, because they thought Oval is looking so good, so let them do the Cross Maidan, which we did. There also we don't charge, and it's open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So, and if maintenance has to be done, we just cordon off a certain area and maintain it. But the BMC is lazy. They don't want to place for security because we have to have round-the-clock security. We have it. It costs a lot of money to look after the Oval and the Cross. Luckily, we were lucky with our funding. So this is it. This is where we are at, battling.
It'll go on because now you've got the race course coming up.
Oh yes, that's the latest battle, by the way. The case is being heard tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
tomorrow,
let's see. They asked for a stay on that whole crazy idea they have.
Yeah.
And
the theme park.
The theme park. And what is the connotation of a theme park? Is it a butterfly park? Because even that is a theme park. That would be fine.
Disney.
But no, this would be
Disney.
the London Eye and the Disney World. So, who knows?
So,
nobody knows.
Yeah, so I think, open spaces, most people know that most livable cities in the world are the ones that have these democratic spaces. And I say democratic because you can have open spaces which are private. So in Bombay, often when there is a discussion about this, they'll say, oh, but X amount of green areas there. But all that has been now gated.
May I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
In the DP, they wanted to show a ratio higher than it actually is.
Yeah.
So even the islands, the traffic islands were counted as open space. So that has no access. So we said it must be accessible open space and rest for the environment. So Raj Bhavan is not accessible, but they counted that. Yeah. It goes on like that. So we had to really pull it down and get the numbers, and it's 1.04 square meters per person. And the norm, according to the Delhi guidelines, central guidelines, is 10 to 12 square meters. Yeah. So we are nowhere.
No, that's why I keep emphasizing. I think even in the language we use, I would really suggest you say open and democratic.
Yeah, good idea. We'll use that now.
and or accessible to all, something like that, that makes this point that it's not just because we have some passion for gardening and want some green spaces, we're not this sort of elite thing. It has to break out of that into saying that these are the spaces that everybody can go.
In fact, the elite don't go there.
Yeah, elite don't go, So, moving on from that, Anuradha, I was thinking of of your AV that you just put on. So, Mumbai is, of course, you say city, what does a city do, and so on, what do people do for the city? But I would ask also, what does the city do for the people who are invisible? Even though they constitute half the city. I mean, this has been a discussion we've had for decades. And even today, when people talk of Mumbai, they'll talk of Bollywood, they'll talk of this part of Mumbai, which is still beautiful and conserved, and people come here to see that. But they forget that half the city are people who come here to work and have no place to live. And the only place that comes up occasionally for discussion is, of course, Dharavi. And that is also not so much for the people who live there, but for the land on which they live, which has gone up in value. So the issue of housing, affordable housing for not just poor, but for everybody in this city has been a discussion, I think has been a lost discussion in the discussion about the city. That's my own opinion. And lately, we've seen what is happening even with Dharavi. Again, it's who can profit more from it rather than how can we create a city where people of all incomes can find a decent place to live, and because they contribute so much. I mean, if this 50% were not here, what would the city be? They literally hold up the city. In the women's movement, we used to have this slogan saying that women hold up the world. And really in Mumbai, it is the 50% who are, a lot of them invisible to us, are the people who hold up the city. So I want to ask Vinod, because Vinod, you've been working in Dharavi, of course, with the waste pickers, but you're also aware of the issues and of the struggle there. So how do you envisage, do you think that this is really going to change, or do you feel with the way in which the whole Dharavi issue has now got into this thing where it's been given to somebody who from appearances would not seem like someone who is really interested in ensuring that the people who have built Dharavi literally, with their own hands, are going to get a fair deal?
So like all things in Mumbai, even Dharavi is going to be one of the big land grabs.
Land grab.
So anything in Mumbai which is for the people always ends up giving a larger share to the cronies of the government, and this is happening with Dharavi also. The entire tender documents have been tweaked
Yeah.
to help one particular corporate to grab Dharavi. So the point is, the people of Dharavi really want their lives to be changed. They are tired of living in those conditions. They want their children to be educated. They want better hospitals. They want better schools and housing. And this cannot be an unreasonable demand for 50% of this city who live in slums. So asking for their constitutional rights, their democratic rights, is not something which is a radical demand. It's a demand of, it's a human rights demand, it's a constitutional civil demand. And every time, even when you give that demand to slums, you have the SRA authority giving the land free of cost to a builder.
Yeah.
As if the MMRDA, the BMC, in fact in Dharavi, the biggest landlord is the BMC. And the BMC won't lift a finger to claim that land. They are so happy to watch all this happening. And if you look at the TDR racket, the TDR which is going to be generated by Dharavi, that this 600 acres, 40% will have to be bought by builders all over the city. It's compulsory. You cannot do a project without buying TDR from which is generated for your project. It has to be bought from the Dharavi project. Now all this is to monetize, help Adani get his funding even before he starts the project. So the project will go on for 7 years for rehab, 14 years, but before that the TDR will be monetized and it is a blank check to him. So every builder will have to run and take their TDR from there. So all this, if it was possible for Adani, why wasn't it possible for the BMC, MMRDA, MADA to do this project, Government of Maharashtra? So let's now go to what the people want. The people of Dharavi who are working people, it's a workers' colony. If you look at Dharavi, there are residential units and every unit has a commercial unit attached to it. So in the center of Mumbai, you have 1 million people, as Kalpana says, holding up the city. Your watchmen, your auto rickshaw drivers, your hawkers, your cooks, your maids, your Uber driver, your Swiggy driver, where are they living? They are living in these slums. And Dharavi provides also highly skilled labor in garments, in leather, in embroidery, and the biggest industry there is recycling. So given all this, where they are doing this without any government help, and in fact they fill the pockets of every government agency, because while they are invisible to the city, they are unofficial, they are grey, but they are hard cash for every official, be it electricity, be it water, be it the corporation, be it the police. Because if you go for an application for setting up an industry, they will tell you this is hazardous, this is polluting, go out of the city. But in Dharavi, you can start any industry you want. You can start melting down aluminium, copper, anything, e-waste, and they will look the other way as long as they get the money. So, Dharavi people, they provide much more money to these city officials, unofficially. And that is what they want. For the middle classes, they do not charge you extra for the water you get. You can use as much water. But in Dharavi, even a jerry can, you got to pay a bribe to someone. You want an electricity connection, you got to pay a bribe. So what is happening is, they would prefer this to be like this. They would prefer this to be like this and get their money out. They don't want development there. But at the same hand, if the people of Dharavi would like houses, it would be in the hands of Adani. So, you know, you're caught between this, that if you take a demand saying that Adani hatao, you seem to be anti-development. Tumko vikas nahi chahiye. You all are the people who are the troublemakers, the urban Naxals who will oppose everything about development. So, if people have to organize themselves, they are ready to pay for the housing. There are various cooperatives which have been done by Spark, and there are housing buildings there, there are societies, so people can develop. And in fact, MADA developed one sector. But right now, Adani is moving ahead with this plan, and it is going to see the largest displacement of working people in this country. More than 500,000 working people will be displaced, and they will be sent to all corners of the city. And the work which they are doing, there is no plan at all to set up any economic package for those who are being dishoused. So that is one of the first things which should strike us, that in the middle of this city, if we don't get the government to tweak this plan and oppose it at this stage, what they are going to create is on 45 acres, where there is no height restriction on the buildings, they are going to set up these huge towers and move the entire population of Dharavi on that 45 acres. They are going to create a density of people into those towers, which are going to be vertical slums, and that will create a problem in central Mumbai. And they will open up all the land on the sides overlooking BKC, and that is what is going to be sold. So I am saying this is the price the city always pays. So I would appeal to all of us residents of Mumbai who want this city to be what we want, to take interest. And it is not only a question of people who are living in Dharavi, but for every Mumbaiker to think and to raise their voices if they think there's something happening in the city which is going to be a disaster. A small fire in Goregaon, the fire engine couldn't reach that building. It took them half an hour to go there, and in that time, a lot of lives were lost. So what are we creating? We are creating these pockets of people, and they don't have any kind of access to civic services. So let us, right now is the correct time that all of us raise our voices and see that this plan which is being designed somewhere else, all of us should take interest and tell the government and tell the people who are the designing authorities that if you are redesigning Dharavi, this is the way it should be, which is people-centric and in the interest of the people of Mumbai.
Do you think the courts can intervene in this, or you're a lawyer, so tell us, is that a realistic expectation? I know in many other instances it is not, but in this, do you think it's possible?
The courts, if we have a legal point, they will interfere, but in most cases where projects are involved, public projects, the courts have taken a decision not to interfere in these kind of projects because they feel this causes delay in the projects. And since the government always says this is a project for 500,000 people who are living in such horrible conditions, unhygienic conditions, and these are, elite middle class people who are living in flats who want to come and, disrupt this plan. And here is a great entrepreneur and a corporate body which has come ahead to develop Dharavi, and in that also these people, they want to basically glamorize poverty and continue the slumdog millionaire story.
Well said. Glamorize poverty.
So I think the danger of the courts is this, that one is they may not listen to you, but we have to use every possible means. I will never give up any forum in the sense that have a set mind. So I'm saying, but the best forum is on the streets, and I have complete confidence in the people of Dharavi that as and when the time comes, if they don't like something, they have to take one step out of their house, and Bombay will come to a complete standstill. If they just take back their labor even for a week, Bombay will come to an halt. So I think we must have faith in the people of Dharavi that they know what they want and they will fight their battles. But that doesn't stop us, because we come from such privileged positions to reach their voice to the authorities.
I'm glad you said this, because I think this, and especially this last thing of reaching their voice. I mean, I'm with the media, and I've been distressed at the way in the last few years, even our reporting on our city has been reduced to, things that really don't touch these kind of real issues, So you get a little bit about Adani and what is happening, but it's as if this is some academic subject and not involving the actual lives of people. When I think any editor should have put a couple of reporters out to go to the different nagars in Dharavi and actually draw a picture for people who don't still know what that place is. And it's one of the many places in Mumbai that are facing similar dilemmas. And as I said, this is 50% of the citizens of the city. And how can we just, have this attitude? And public opinion, can only be built by a combination of these factors. Of course, the residents of Dharavi coming out on the streets, but public opinion being built through many other fora. And the media plays a very important role in that, which is sadly lacking on many grounds. But on this particularly, on I think, city reporting, we have not had the kind of engagement that perhaps was there 20 years ago in our newspapers and television channels I cannot speak of.
Can I just interrupt for a minute? You talked about policy and free housing. And one of the things that Nagar took up in 2002, and we are still in court, because I think in the final, as you asked, can you go to court, what will happen, is that there was a policy for free housing for slum dwellers on public open spaces. So we said, look, you can't have them on public open spaces, and together with that, 15% of the land will be given to the builder who builds the slum rehab, and the builder will get double the FSI. So out of 100%, 67% was lost to construction, and the city would get back 33.5%, and the government thought that was a fair deal.
That was transit housing.
That was transit, yeah.
No, not transit housing, Pakka housing.
Not the SRA.
SRA, we are in court, Kalpana, I know.
Challenging SRA, but it's already like...
No, challenging SRA on public open spaces, challenging that particular, not SRA, we are not involved.
Okay.
On public open spaces, like in the Oval, if there was a slum, then they would say, okay, now 37% can go into building.
Okay.
But we got a stay. Many of them came to us, the builders, because that is what the court said, get an okay from us, the NGO which is, filed this petition. And we've been able to return a lot of land to the city. Because of that. But if your plot is 100% encroached, then you can't allow them to build there, because if you build there, that means it will only be free sale housing. It's a very strange policy, and this is all free housing during the Shiv Sena government.
And similar thing happened during,
Can we come back?
Sorry, I talked about public spaces, so I just said,
I'd like to bring in Shweta because apart from, as I said, affordable housing for 50% of the residents of the city, infrastructure we obviously know is important, and as I said, a lot of it comes either too late, even though it's been thought about decades back, and by the time they get around to implementing it, and then it all gets implemented at the same time, creating further chaos in the city, or it's inappropriate, as in the case of the coastal road. And despite the fact that there was some opposition to it, a lot of the opposition was raised on environmental grounds, but I think in the case especially of the coastal road and even reclamations that have been done, not enough in terms of the livelihood of the people who actually are the people who have given this city its name. In a sense, its character has come from the fishing communities that lived here before it became what it is today. So, Shweta, you have done both a study and you have worked on this issue. So, how do you feel this kind of thing, first of all, can be communicated to people at large? To give us an idea of the kind of things that you have taken up vis-a-vis the coastal road and the fisherfolk, but also look ahead to what, it seems like inevitable now, it's just going ahead. Now it's next month it's going to be inaugurated, though Mr. Shinde claims he will inaugurate it at the end of this month, but we will see. But, can anything be done to stop these things which are big money going to people's pockets, where our little fishing communities do not count? So what can be done? But tell us first about what you have tried to do.
I think even for the reader, I've contributed an essay which actually looks at the timeline of the coastal road project. So many people are of the assumption that the work started in 2000 2018, and it was in 2019 that the cases were filed. However, the contestation or the opposition to the coastal road began much earlier. That was in 2014 when the Joint Technical Committee put out the report on the coastal road, and that's when we began by writing, I think, the first article about, you know, how this project is unviable, because they were planning to reclaim hectares of land from the sea and to create open space. You know, the earlier road that was already constructed was the Bandra-Worli Sea Link, and that was a road which was built on stilts. However, the Joint Technical Committee report actually argued, it had several prominent architects in the city were a part of that committee, but they argued that reclamation would be a cheaper option, and it would also give us an added benefit of creating more land for the city. So the justification for the coastal road was not simply about, you know, solving the transport problem, but also the creation of more land or open space. And they argued that that would actually mitigate, you know, the impacts due to pollution, and a creation of a new freeway would, in fact, because of you know, the free flow of traffic, will actually reduce pollution. So those were the justifications that were given. So the contestation to the coastal road was there were various groups, like there were planners, there were environmentalists, there were you know, the fisherfolk community, of course, there were transport planners, there were BST union workers, and in 2015 there was an independent people's tribunal was set up, because people had given their suggestions or objections to the coastal road, but those were not considered by the BMC, and that's when HRLN and various civil society groups conducted an independent people's tribunal, and in that it was clearly the, you know, it came out that this project is not really sustainable and it does not really benefit the citizens. It is not in the public interest at large. So I would like to add to
only benefit some 2 to 4% of the population.
Exactly. So I think that if 15,000 crores are being spent on an infrastructure project, if BMC had simply used that money, the BMC could have rehoused all the residents in Dharavi, you know. So it is that amount which is being sent. So on one hand, they are handing over Dharavi to Adani, and on the other hand, they are saying that, you know, the coastal road is a project which is actually not really in the public interest, because it only serves the 2 or 3% of the you know, population, who are actually the people who are contributing to the traffic problem. So it's not even enhancing public transport in the city. So that said, there was an IPT set up, and, you know, even the all the report that was put out was sent to the BMC. That was not considered. Public opinion was not considered. BMC, however, because they said that they are not experts, they are citizens, you know. So I think this is kind of keeps recurring, because it is citizens' knowledge which is then counterposed with expert knowledge, and BMC has hired experts and, you know, consultants who basically are hired to justify or rationalize everything that they want to do. So it's then citizens, you know, studies which are pitted against the National Institute of Oceanography or the CMFRI, and that's how it's been going. So it was in 2018, so there was an amendment made to the CRZ. So I'd also like to emphasize the coastal regulation zone, because that is what protected the coastline of the city. And although it was an environmental regulation, it has also been supported by the fisher community, because it also protects their livelihood rights. So it's the fisher community who has struggled to keep this regulation. However, for the coastal road project, the CRZ was diluted in 2016. So while the CRZ allowed the construction of stilt roads in intertidal areas, an amendment to the CRZ now allowed reclamation and the construction of reclaimed roads, and this amendment was particularly done to facilitate the coastal road project. So it wasn't. However, despite a lot of awareness that we try to do across communities along the coast, and, you know, different groups of citizens, it was only in 2018 when the construction work actually began that people, you know, started taking an interest. It was not just the citizens, but that's when the fisherfolk in Worli Kolivada, who were mainly impacted by the project, that's when they realized that they had no idea they were not aware of that so much land would be reclaimed from the sea, and they actually argued that that is actually that entire stretch was their fishing zone. So when MCGM had hired consultants like Stoop Consultants and L&T to do the EIA and the SIA or the DPR for the project, they had done surveys only on land. There was no survey of the sea and no survey of the intertidal areas. And BMC in fact avoided, in fact they are supposed to do a year-long study, like a baseline study of marine biodiversity and also a study of fisheries. They avoided doing that because that would have taken a year and then they would have, the project would have got delayed. So which is, and this is on record what BMC officials said, that they wanted to avoid a year-long study and they wanted to go ahead and start the work. So the environment impact assessment and social impact assessment had no mention of the marine biodiversity, nor did they acknowledge the existing fishing practices. And that's when the two societies in Varli Kolivada decided to file a writ petition. And we actually did a study of the fishing practices in Varli. It was released. We had a press conference releasing that, and this was particularly a report which we did to tender in court to support their writ petition. Interestingly, the fisherfolk were the first to go to court, and then subsequently they were followed by several NGOs and environmental groups and activists, and there were at least 5 public interest litigations and the writ petition, but that happened later in April. In the meantime, BMC kept insisting that there is no fishing activity there. They said that we don't see fishing boats in the sea, and fishing does not happen all throughout the day. It's at certain times that the fisherfolk go out to fish, and usually it's very early in the morning or late in the evening. And they said that there's no fishing activity there. When the fisherfolk insisted that there is fishing activity and we released the report, BMC denied that there's fishing happening in the intertidal areas, which were actually being reclaimed by the coastal road. That's when we produced another report which specifically documented many different kinds of practices on the rocky shore. The rocky shore has always been characterized as this barren stretch which has, you know, it's a wasteland, there is no, of no value, and which is why it can be reclaimed. However, it's a very productive zone of the coast, and even quality fish from the, you know, which large fish from the deeper seas come there to breed and lay their eggs just before the monsoon season. So all this was pointed out in court, and that's when the High Court said that how can the coastal road work start without a fishing zone study, and the High Court actually asked CMFRI to undertake a rapid survey. And the rapid survey, in fact, confirmed our findings, and they said that actually the intertidal area with the rocky pools are actually places where the juvenile fish breed, and, you know, the juveniles fish find shelter. There are also oysters where, you know, particularly women fishers are involved in picking oysters along that stretch. So all this was pointed out in the BMC. The BMC tried to suppress the CMFRI report, and then they denied it, saying that this is a personal opinion of one of the scientists. They later got another CMFRI, official CMFRI report done, which again said that there is no fishing of any consequence of you know, any great value that happens in that area. So this is how BMC uses, you know, when citizens produce studies or reports, BMC then uses their consultants or hired consultants to then, you know, undermine the studies put forth by the fisherfolk or the citizens groups. They also deny the understanding or the practical knowledge of the fisherfolk, you know, and they literally claim that they are, you know, it's the NIO experts or the CMFRI scientists, they have a better understanding of these activities. Another thing that I would want to point out is that the court usually, I experience, the way I've structured this essay is that I've first talked about the way the arenas in which the coastal road, battle against the coastal road was fought. So the first part of the essay focuses on the legal arena, and the battle was initially fought through negotiations with bureaucrats and in in the courts. And later this battle shifted to the public arena. So that's how I have structured it. So our experience with the legal arena has not been very promising, in the sense that when, although there were several petitions in court and many of them argued on procedural or legal grounds, because it has to be either some violation of a regulation, so a CRZ violation or an amendment to the CRZ, or because they have not followed the procedure under the environment impact assessment notification, where they are supposed to conduct a mandatory public hearing. And so BMC had also tried to bypass the public hearing process. And so all the petitions were focusing on legal grounds. There was a specific petition on biodiversity, and another study done by a group of citizens had, which had documented the marine biodiversity and also recorded the presence of Schedule 1 species of coral in the stretch that was being reclaimed. So that was tendered to that report. So although these reports were, but largely these reports were, countered the project on legal or procedural lapses. The court generally doesn't rule on policy decisions. The project is not in the public interest. It doesn't really serve a large part of the city's population. It also is environmentally and socially unsustainable. But that's something that the court doesn't want to rule on. However, what we realized is, luckily we had a very good judge in the High Court. In fact, the petitioners were waiting for Justice Nandrajog to come in before we filed the petition, so that, because we knew that before that we would not get a positive response. And he immediately, within a week of filing the petitions, we got a stay. So it was a verbal stay, but BMC continued the work, and with much more, they started dumping day and night. And that's when petitioners literally had to barge into the coastal road site, and we had to call the media and, create a ruckus, so that on the next day he gave us a written stay, and saying that basically for precautionary, following the precautionary principle, they should stop reclamation. However, the BMC and the contractors immediately went to the Supreme Court, and they in the Supreme Court, they argued that the BMC contractors were suffering losses. They were not concerned about the losses suffered by the fisherfolk, and immediately the work started, and the reclamation continued through the monsoons.
Also, didn't the central government tweak the EIA? Am I right
CRC.
that the EIA consider, what you said, that for the environmental
Impact assessment.
assessment, they should have had that public hearing.
Yeah, but
didn't they make an exception?
No,
so
in fact, Nandrajog, when in June, he quashed the CRZ clearance, and he also ruled that they have to redo the environment impact assessment and conduct the mandatory public hearing. So in fact we got a court order which was in our favor in the High Court, but then again the BMC and the contractors rushed to the Supreme Court, and in December the work was stayed. The High Court order was stayed. The work was allowed to continue. It continued throughout the COVID. I think all other construction work in the city had stopped, but they did not stop. In fact, they accelerated the pace of work on the coastal road. And I think there was another petition filed during COVID, because I think concerning the conditions of, workers, or the health of the workers who were working on the project. However, BMC also decided to reclaim additional area, which was not a part of the original DPR. So we had one online hearing where all the petitioners also, argued that that is not done. They'll have to go back and get a fresh CRZ clearance. However, even that clearance was given by the MOAFC. So our experience with the legal arena or the courts has not been very, positive, and we realized that although we went in the High Court, and it was a 150-page hearing by Justice Nandrajog, and the Supreme Court, the work on the project is complete, but the case has not still been heard in the Supreme Court. The hearing just keeps being postponed. It's still pending, and it's not been disposed of. So unfortunately, that was our experience in the courts, and by the end of the COVID pandemic, the reclamation was already complete. All the marine biodiversity and intertidal fishing was almost finished. And that's when I talk about the second part of the story, where in fact, I think most of the petitioners and groups who had were already frustrated, because it's almost the damage that is done to the coastal ecosystem and our coastline is irreversible. There's nothing that can be done about it. But then there was another aspect where I got involved, where the fisherfolk called me and they said that now they've started constructing this stretch of the coastal road, which is a bridge, that interchange, which will connect the reclaimed part of the road to the sea link. And that's where they said that this is our jetty, Cleveland Bandar, and if this link is constructed with the distance between the pillars is too narrow for boats to access their fishing grounds. Intertidal fishing is already finished, and if we don't take our boats out, this is the main jetty, we will not be able to continue with our livelihood. And all of them, they said that something has to be done, and then that's when we strategized and we said that, okay, we have to do something which will actually have impact, and they decided to stop the work. So they surrounded that temporary jetty in their boats, and I think this was widely covered in the media, the protest in the sea. And what we realized is it was only when they stopped the work, when the contractors were actually being impacted due to the pause in construction, that's when they started getting calls from the politicians and the bureaucrats, and Iqbal Chal called us for a meeting. So it was that was very interesting, that it was they were not for so many years, like it was since 2018 they had not bothered to meet the fisherfolk, but they stopped the work.
Shweta, I'll come back to you about the success.
Right.
But in brief, this is one of the hopeful ones that, where a combination of action by the affected community and the build-up that was done by all the other things, including court intervention, at least to that extent led to something. But we'll come back to it.
Sure.
But I think what I'm hearing from all three of you, and I think that is something which we should carry forward with much more discussion, is that in a city like this and the kind of challenges it faces, it can't be one thing or the other, obviously. Yeah, so we can't depend on the courts. We've seen that that is not a solution. Even people's actions, we know, on so many issues that we know in the history of the city, when people have come out on the streets, that has not necessarily, that has made an impact. It has pushed to some extent, but maybe not enough to make it. So I think what I'd like to know from both of you and all three of you, and maybe we can ask, open it up to the audience also, that the way the city is developing at the moment, it's like heading towards a disaster. Yeah, because the things that ought to be done are not being done, and we are getting things done to the city which are not needed, basically. I'm just summing it up briefly. And yet every type of person living in this city, but more particularly, as I said, the 50% whose voices are not heard enough, are going to suffer the consequences of what is happening. And this is the leading city in India. So I think the opportunity it presents us is that if civil society groups get together, maybe on a couple of really crucial issues, like Vinod was saying, maybe Dharavi, which is an instance of how affordable housing, urban poverty, the fact of the people who hold up the city, their needs have not become a priority for decades now in the city, and it's about time this thing is addressed. All the politicians say all the right things, but on the ground these things are not done. But whichever of these issues it is, that maybe there has to be more coalition building and things on a bigger scale to make an impact, even on the media, for it to wake up to these issues. Somehow scale seems to get to the media, whereas individual battles by individual groups doing it in their different areas doesn't seem to make that difference. So just a quick response from you, and then maybe we can open it up to the audience. Do you think, how do you envisage us taking forward civil society engagement in the city so that it can make a difference?
So I think one thing is connecting with each other's struggles, because this kind of unity of the fishermen with slum dwellers, with people who are demanding open spaces, because there is a divide in this city between the demands of, say, the South Bombay or civil society, who want to protect heritage, who want their roads, and they basically want a clean city, okay? So from clean city, and then there is a demand of people who want to live, you know, who are fighting for basics. So we have to build a bridge between these two movements, and this, once we are united, even the government and the authorities and the ministers and the political parties then understand that they can't divide the people and continue their, you know, maladministration of the city. Because right now what they're doing is, because for the political parties, it's a political issue. Like today there's a group of political parties who are opposing the redevelopment. When they were in power, they wanted it, and those people in power were opposing it. So I'm saying this game of musical chairs for the parties is going to go on. But we as citizens, we as people who are interested in this city, we will have to go out from our comfort zones, and we'll have to make friends and start conversations, dialogue with those people, and understand that everyone's problem is our problem. Because what the citizens who are in civil society, what we call as, you know, elite people, what they lack is the force behind them. Okay, they are individuals, they are, you know, they lack it when they are bulldozed, you know, in the courts, and administration just stops them. And that is when you need the support, like this story about the fishermen, you know, just surrounding the contractor. I mean, these are the success stories, and that is how, when the morchas came out of Dharavi, that is when suddenly Mantralaya woke up and they started calling everybody and saying, let's have a conversation. In fact, consulates have woken up, and some consulates have asked, come and give us a presentation, like what is happening in the middle of the city. Is it a problem? So I'm saying now suddenly people are waking up that this is going to be a large displacement, and there is going to be disruption in various flow of migratory patterns, labor, and the city is going to go through something, because they're worried. The size of that morcha which came to BKC was jammed. So that worries them, that if the people of Dharavi just keep on coming out.
Yes.
So I'm saying we have to start that conversation, and we have to write these stories. Wherever we can, we should speak about these things, that what is 380 square feet? What is 500 square feet? For a family of 6, 7, okay, they are supposed to be in this 380 square feet. So I'm saying this is what is being offered. Now, is that something where we can accept? So we have to understand, can a demand for 500 square feet, is it unreasonable? You know?
Yeah.
So this is the way we have to understand the problems which people are facing, because unless you understand their problems, we are not going to be able to articulate our demands.
Yeah.
And it is not giving them a blank check. We are simply saying that if you're giving this much to a builder, why don't you give something more to the people who are actually going to live in those houses?
Also, what we discovered in the, at UDRI when you're doing the DP, is that the slum, the redeveloped buildings, the regulation makes them so close to each other that we did a study, the doctors did a study, where the sun doesn't come down till 7 floors and below. Now, even if they got 500 square feet, Vinod, if the buildings are going to be cheek by jowl, yeah, so it is based, yeah, and 20 stories. So the point is that you have to have policy of planning and this kind of thing all working together. Just now the policies are a mess. I mean, they were allowing 4G cell towers on all the public spaces. We took them to court, and we only got a stay order on some legal issue because they had tried to fiddle in the permission. You know, they had not done a proper suggestion objection. But it stayed and it stayed. They wanted 4G cell towers in all the, and that takes away that much space, and it's...
Yeah, I think the opposition, I think today people are doing it in a piecemeal manner.
Yeah.
It's mostly like a kind of a firefighting or opposition to particular projects, or or implementation of particular things, and one is not thinking about it at a broader planning or policy level in terms of what is happening with the city. And I think that one thing with NGOs, and they are also limited in the sense because of their institutional constraints, that they cannot really, they don't have a mass base or support. So I think it's important to have a kind of a broader coalition between different civil society groups and organizations and, you know, communities. And this was something that had started happening, I think, in 2014, when a lot of organizations had come together in opposition to the development plan. It wasn't perfect. That also had its problems and limitations. However, I think that at least it was promising in the sense that, you know, different groups had come together and actually tried to put across their demands in a more coherent manner. I think that's something that.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I mean, you talked about technical knowledge. We have institutes who need to constantly churn out ideas for the city. They need to constantly churn out updated data for the city and research for the city. So often what happens is that even when there is a will to act, one doesn't understand the large scale impact of policy, or they don't have the tools to engage. So I mean, while it is a collective, like you said, that it is a piecemeal sort of action that happens, one has to, civil society and institutes need to play the role of putting out those easy tools for people to engage in a consistent manner. They need to understand what is the long-term impact. Even that is a role that needs to be played.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. I was saying the example now, when we are discussing Dharavi, what comes to mind is because I was involved in the struggle of the textile workers. So in 82, when the strike took place, and afterwards right from 82 to 90, we were fighting for the textile workers to just get their gratuity. That is just to get their earned salary and get their legal dues. And this battle went on for 10 years. The mill owners didn't give that money, and they insisted that only if they sell their land will they be able to pay the workers. They blackmailed the city. And these were some of the most prominent corporate houses and industrialists in this city. People who go around telling everybody that they care for the city. And these are the people who didn't give those workers 1 lakh rupees. And today in Worli, they are selling those flats for 1 lakh rupees a square foot. And at that time, the city didn't wake up to this disaster which is happening. Today, when you go through Lower Parel, Elphinstone Road, Mahalakshmi, Baikala, it's happening. There are 40-storied, 50-storied towers coming in Mahalakshmi, famous studio inside the lane. So go to Bandra East, it's cluster housing which is coming up. So I'm saying we don't respond to this, and when the textile workers were fighting, they were fighting for their legal dues, for survival. At that time, it was an opportunity to build bridges with those unions and take it to a larger level of even saying that why should this land which has been given as industrial land be just handed over to the mill owners. It's like a largesse, you know, and all of them have built these towers. Today when you stand at Worli Naka, you may not even see the sea. You know, there's nothing. It's just that. Like what's happened to Haji Ali. If you go via Haji Ali, and now they want an underground tunnel which is going from there to the Mumbai Trans Harbour link.
Yes.
So I'm saying this kind of development where we don't intervene, there's no statement by anybody. I think even individual organizations, if they just give out a statement, either in solidarity or criticizing that, will make an impact. If it comes even 2 lines. So we should all respond to each other's issues.
So Nayana is rightly saying the media doesn't cover, but
media doesn't cover this kind of things.
But I think, you know, I think the reality now is that people are getting information through a lot of
social
other,
media, yes.
other ways,
Which
rather
is what
than
should be
mainstream
done.
media.
Yeah.
And you can just decide to bypass and figure out a way of getting this
That's
out.
right,
And I think if the message gets out that there are enough people in this city who are fighting for these issues, I think that feeling has gone. And that has to come with people getting together. It can't be individual pockets. And I think that is the thing we have to think about. But I think I should open up to the audience.
Yeah.
So maybe we can have about 10-15 minutes for question and answer. I would ask people who ask the question to please identify yourself and then ask a specific question.
Okay, so Nayana,
Just tell people who you are.
yeah, my name is Rishi Agarwal. I was long back involved with Mangrove Society of India Mumbai chapter, but activism on a lot of other issues in Mumbai. I've also written for the Reader. So why people think like that? I mean, us versus we, when you said the BMC. I mean, I remember during that time, JM Phatak who was municipal commissioner 2007-8, very short period. He did a very interesting thing. He carried out a survey to contest you guys, city space especially, saying that I'll carry out a survey of citizens of Mumbai and ask them where does open space lie in their priorities for the city. And his survey had shown, I think 13 number or 7 number, something like that. And he used that survey very, very nicely against civil society to say that you guys are completely out of touch with the citizens of Mumbai.
Because if you give
We,
us-
the bureaucrats and the politicians, know what people
Yeah.
think and what they want. The point I'm driving across, and you sounded hopeful at times, Kalpana, but I don't think there is any hope at all. Any, zero. It's a negative. And the reason why I say that is I'll contest some of the timelines which, say, Vinod or Shweta especially has shared. The fight for Coast Road did not start in 2014 or 2018. That is like a way too old. It started in 2004 with Hafiz Contractor suggesting,
That's right.
suggesting that the coastline, western coastline, should uniformly be reclaimed from Kolaba till Dahisar,
That's
up
right.
till 200 meters into the sea, uniformly.
Right.
It should be one straight line.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember contesting his ideas in Bombay Times,
That's
because
right.
that time Bombay Times was still not Bollywood Times. It was still Bombay Times, and we discussed Bombay's issues in Bombay Times up till 2005. And I remember counter arguing forcefully. And then 2005, the tsunami and all that happened. MS Swaminathan was given the charge of rationalizing CRZ. He came up with some terrible arguments. 2008-9, Roshan Daboiwala, late Roshan Daboiwala, Daryl and me are sitting in Bandra and discussing the imminent arrival of stilt roads. That was the first CRZ thing. Nobody shows up in the city. I mean, if you go to Times of India archives, I have 1 or 2 articles, but there is enough. I mean, what do the people of Mumbai read? They read the sports column and they read Bollywood timelines, lifestyles. Nobody reads. I mean, Richa is here. Clara covered so much prominently that time. All the first objection to the Coast Road, I remember with Narendra Nair. I fought it out in Bombay First
Bombay
Office.
First.
May 2011. All our quotes are in the Times of India, and both of us coughing each other. He's telling, Arey, Rishi thinks that some mosquitoes will breed under... And in fact, our opposition to the stilt road is what led to the further dilution and saying that, oh, stilt roads are not good. Let's just reclaim fully. And Subodh Kumar in that particular year coming out with fungible FSI, specifically saying that we will raise 4,000 crores a year to fund coastal road. Fungible FSI, which means everybody on a per square feet basis has funded. So the people of Mumbai are extremely disappointing. The great Indian middle class was extremely disappointing. I mean, I was just at the Ghoda festival and just thinking all these kids, etc. Who thinks about these issues? J.M. Phatak was prophetic and very, very insightful survey he did. People don't think. Even on Dharavi, Mukesh Mehta, when he popped up in 2005, was alarm bells. Simple. That was Mukesh Mehta pops up, then don't get surprised if in a 2003-4 and Adani takes it over. So when he popped up, this whole march is just, these are political stunts, right? Aditya Thackeray will pay everybody and say, ki, haan, march mein join karo. But the actual the Dharavi resident, kahan se? For 1 week, agar wo chhod denge, participate karna, they will end up going out. So I'm just, you can respond.
I hope others are not as pessimistic as Rishi.
I know.
Yeah. Yes. Please take this mic. Yeah. Pass this on to him.
Hi. Okay. I feel like it feels a bit weird to talk like optimistically now, but anyways, thanks first. I just wanted to say that thank you for sharing your work. This was
say
really.
who you are, please.
Oh yeah. I was just busy taking notes on my phone. So my name is Poonam, and Vishal and I here, we work with the Pani Haq Samiti that's been working for equitable distribution of water, for water in the city, and especially for like legal water access for people living in slums. And actually a chapter in the Reader is being contributed by our collective. So my question was regarding the civic action strategies, and I mean all of you like talked a little bit about it. But would you care to share like some more lessons or challenges as we help connect these different movements, like build solidarity, and especially thinking of the basic rights movements? It's like a general question, but still.
I would say that Hussein is here and so many of us, we are engaged in taking this information which we have learned to the stakeholders in Dharavi. I'm just giving an example. The same thing we had done with the textile movement also. There was Girangaon Bachao Andolan. So I'm saying which was larger, we involved a lot of theatre people, people who are in the Girangaon. So I'm saying unless movements have a community participation, where we are able to engage with the city more in their terms, not our terms. And for that we have to walk that extra mile and talk to people and understand these cultures. Because Bombay people, like in Dharavi itself, there are people from Tamil Nadu to Bihar to UP to Gujarat. And this kind of population, which is actually an example of, you know, migration into the city, and they are so secular, they are so democratic in terms of values. They celebrate each other's festivals, and if you look at the history of riots, you would expect, you know, 1 million people living in 2.5 square kilometers, 600 acres, the kind of tension that would have been in that kind of density, where somebody has a Eid and somebody is celebrating Ram Mandir and somebody is removing a Julus, Tazia, all this, you could imagine what kind of tensions would be there. So I'm saying even in a sense of the democratic values of people who are working people, because for them the stakes are very high. If you burn each other's houses and factories, what is going to happen tomorrow? So some politician may come and try and start a riot, but that lasts only for 2-3 days, because the mohalla committees get active, people come out and they say ban karo. You know, because people's lives are entwined, and this choreography of people, unless we understand, like the trains, if you see how people are sandwiched in these Virar trains and locals, they should be out every day stopping the trains and protesting. But inside a train, there is a democratic understanding that all of us are feeling the pressure, we are all sweating, and we all have to go home or to work. So if you start a fight, people in the compartment will stop. So I'm saying this kind of, I'm not saying people should keep on bearing suffering and taking this. That's not the story. The success is that you reach your destination and you try to protect each other. Okay? So this city will have to learn to take up each other's problems and take the experts along and also the people along. So I'm saying the media will come forward if we have these success stories. If the stories keep on coming up of success and of resistance, the media will have to cover it. Because like the politicians, like today, Dharavi issue, there are opposition parties which want to take it up for the next election. So you make your issue hot, even if politicians will sell out. The people have tasted resistance. The people are asking and articulating their demands. Believe in the democratic process. If we lose hope and we start thinking that the democratic process is over, and that is the day when the fascists will take over. So I'm saying the fight is going to be there. It's not going to be an easy victory, but the journey is long, but the resistance is going to be, it's going to be a tough fight. Believe in that, and I think the young people, they've learned that. And they are using social media, every possible art, documentaries to tell the story. So we've got to take these stories into different media, put it across and tell our stories, and hope more and more young people join this battle.
So also, you know, data and information is vital. People don't know. Today I've been listening to Vinod. Of course I know what Dharavi has been and all, but today what he's put forth, for example, a lot of it we didn't know, we don't know. So, for example, for Dharavi, if we were to put out this information out into the public domain, let people get to know what is happening. You know, everybody thinks, "Arey, ghar banane hai, acha hai, bhai Islam hai, ghar bana do." You know, I mean, that's the bottom line. So, information is power, and data is required. Statistics are required.
And I think, Shweta, your example, I mean, which you didn't complete,
Hey.
No, but
but
you can.
that also,
that
also is an example of exactly what Vinod is saying. People's, intervention.
So, so I think that when the fisherfolk, earlier the entire struggle was in the legal domain. So that was either negotiations with bureaucrats or, you know, petitions in court. And that did not really have any impact because it was, somehow it was, political demands were actually had to be framed as legal or procedural ones. They were not really, out there. And when the fisherfolk stopped construction on the coastal road, that's when it was, there were women, there were children, and they were literally camped out there in the sea for almost over 2 months, and they did not let BMC continue the work. The contractors used to try to come and start the work, and these people used to go and chase them away. So it was literally a war at sea. And you spoke about strategy. So in fact, that was an excellent strategy because somehow the fisherfolk were not able to protest on land. We had tried land protests, but immediately the police would be, at the jetty, the fishermen would be restrained, and that would never have worked. But the protest in the sea was simply remarkable. And in the sense, it also got a lot of media support. So every day after the protest, we would, I would send it to all the media, and like it was literally almost covered in all the Marathi and English newspapers, and somehow that also strengthened that struggle. We also got solidarity from different groups, like for instance, we got 50 academics, eminent citizens and, citizens in the cities to write a kind of a letter to Aditya Thackeray saying that people's lives and livelihoods are more important than profits, and y'all can, because BMC was refusing to increase the distance between the columns simply because it would have caused a delay and because it would have resulted in that much more escalated the costs. And there were citizens writing to Aditya Thackeray saying that people's lives and their safety, because if the navigation route was precarious, it was a rocky area through which they had to navigate. It was a part of the open sea where there were currents which would come in, and it was literally a danger to their lives, and the construction of those bridges would have actually would have meant an end to fishing in Cleveland Bandar. So so all this kind of work, all these strategies work together. They also got all the fishermen from other fishing villages in the city they organized a protest where they invited fisherfolk from all across Mumbai who came, and there was a large gathering on one day. So all these things had to be staged to create more pressure. Aditya Thackeray, however, just before the second COVID lockdown, he organized an online conference where he said that we want to start the work. So he asked the fisherfolk to produce a report. There also fisherfolk representatives were not allowed to argue. We were muted, and they, they continued with the work from the next day. The fisherfolk were then asked to get a technical report to prove that the span needed to be increased. And we had a meeting in Iqbal Chah's office after that, where he said that who are the fisherfolk? Like, even Ashwini Bhide said, who are the fisherfolk? Why should we listen to them? NIO has said that the span is enough. This is according to standards. And we were trying to argue that you can't apply the same standards for a bridge in the open sea as, the same standards used for harbors cannot apply here, because there you have, the sea is calm. Here you have a lateral drift, you have a current, and it's a danger. Then they propose something like these to kind of clad the columns with fenders to kind of minimize impact. They even propose CCTV cameras so that so that people would know that there's an accident and there would be immediate response. And they actually offered insurance. So after that, the fisherfolk were really outraged. They said that this is, like the government doesn't care about our lives, it's just about profits, and that's when the whole struggle got politicized, and it was taken up in the state assembly by the opposition party. And when Eknath Shinde became the CM, that's when the fisherfolk decided to approach Eknath Shinde. Aditya Thackeray was actually he was in charge of the Worli constituency, so it was like, so the fisherfolk literally used that to then approach Eknath Shinde, and Shinde then immediately set up a meeting with an expert committee, a geomorphologist who were hired by the fisherfolk, and the technical experts like NIO, and within a matter of hours they said that the span needs to be increased to 120 meters. So in a sense this is a success story, but I think the remarkable thing here, or the lesson for us here, is that when we try to simplify it in the legal or the technical arena, that's when they counter our reports with expert reports. And what the fisherfolk managed to do in case of the coastal road was repoliticize infrastructure development in a sense, and I think that is something which is important as a lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think that's a very key point, politicize infrastructure. And I think the other thing that I hear from all three of you is that, we have to be aware that it's what you see will not impress those who make the policy. Even they will not see it, even if you give them the evidence, because of these machinations that take place.
Totally.
And what are the machinations for? Is to maximize the profits.
Exactly.
Ultimately, whether it's out of land, whether it's out of construction, this is a city of gold, but the gold is going into a few pockets and continues to do so. And now it's at the cost of this kind of infrastructure that's being built instead of the money. I mean, today the papers are saying that the BMC has got crores of rupees that lie unused.
Of course,
Unused. I mean, this is atrocious in a city like this.
Some of the reports were atrocious. Like NIO, like there is, like Marine Life of Mumbai had produced a report saying that there are Schedule 1 species in the intertidal zone. So this is actually an acknowledgement that that area is CRZ1A, which is ecologically sensitive, and therefore the road should not be built. So that was the argument which was being made. So NIO says that no, there are minuscule patches of corals, and then their mitigation was that they transplanted the coral to another location in Chowpatty, and they allowed the construction to go ahead. So it is literally ridiculous, the kinds of the kinds of hired consultants who are used to counter.
And one second, Rishi. And I think the other thing that is, you've touched on this transplanting. Nayana and I were just talking about this thing of transplanting trees, you cut the trees and you claim that you just plant them somewhere else, and somehow the problem will be solved. In a city that needs more trees, you just remove a whole lot, plant them and ensure that they die.
And they want to create a Miyawaki forest on the concretized stretch of the coastal road, which I again,
this Miyawaki forest is another
What I read in the newspaper just 3 days back is that the land which has been reclaimed, so they have come out with a tender to build a township on that land when they took the permission, environmental clearance, saying that this land will not be used or developed.
Yes.
So they've just bought out the tender.
Which land?
This is at Bandra reclamation.
Yes, I saw that.
So now, I'm
Bandra,
saying this is the key example. Now the residents of Bandra reclamation have objected.
Yes.
This is when people from all over Bombay should write
object,
and say that when the environmental clearance was given to you with the understanding that you will not develop this, it will be an open space. How can you put this tender out? And this is a direct contempt of every department and every agency which has given you the permission. But this letter has to come from everywhere. Representation should go immediately. Otherwise, imagine they are planning some major township just on that Bandra reclamation after the bridge.
This kind of letter writing is very useful, and sometimes people don't respond. We've even drafted letters for them to say, just tweak them a little so it doesn't seem it's like a cyclo-style photocopied version. But we're giving them all the information, but please send it out. The numbers make all the difference, whether it is letters,
and to the
people,
editors, write to the editors.
Editors, everybody and their uncles.
Well, I think this kind of discussion is, I think we have to conclude now, but I would just say that we obviously need more of these, and UDRI should give us more fora to have this, which would also, two things. One is, as all of us have been saying, that I think in a way we need another Nagrik Ekta Manch, bringing citizens together, on certain big ticket issues for this city, because that's the only way voices will be heard. And I think we have to now work at reimagining what we want Mumbai to be, because there's no point harking back to some past where it was, because that past is gone. I mean, you just drive past Haji Ali and even to see, you can't see, it's a done deal. So then what do we, and this is where young people come in. I mean, they have to now articulate, what do you want the city to be? Who is the city going to be for? Who are the people for whom the city should be working to make sure that they have a decent life, you know? If I think that is articulated, you know, reimagining what we want for Mumbai, and we get that out into the public space, get people to talk about it, get kids in colleges to talk about this, have debates about it, you know, it needs to be a sort of churning rather than us sitting back into our little things and thinking that, because change will not come unless that kind of united thing. And I think, you know, UDRI and others can be the people who, because you're looking at the larger picture, to be able to stimulate this in many more fora. So that is the way I would end this. I mean, we could go on talking for a long time, but thank you, all of you, because I think all of you have given us a lot to think about.
Thank you.
I thank the audience also for sitting and listening.